Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
You are listening to the financialsurvivalnetwork.com. I'm Kerry Lutz on 1230 WBZT. You definitely know the person you're about to hear from, a legend in many, many circles, but especially ours when it comes to honest money and sound government. We're talking about G. Edward Griffin, Creature from Jekyll Island. And Mr. Griffin, welcome back to the Financial Survival Network.
Well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, so we're seeing a marked deterioration in everything. And right now the focus is on the deterioration of the United States, its influence, its economy, its currency. But pretty soon it'll ship back to Europe and Japan like clockwork. It all seems to be part of the plan. What's your take now? Where are we in the scheme of things in what you believe to be the plan of the elites?
Well, that's a tough question to answer because I think that the plan is very broad. I don't think that it's micromanaged, but I do think there are broad objectives. Maybe the timelines aren't finely tuned and all of that, but certainly there is a timeline. And the truth of the matter is I'm not privy to any of that. But, you know, standing back and observing what's been going on for many decades now, I think it's pretty easy for anybody to figure out at least the direction and the relative speed that things are moving. But the big question is, people want to know is, well, when will the end come? You know, or sometimes they phrase it as, when will the New World Order arrive? As though someday they're going to announce it. You know, like they'll ring the bells at noon and say, well, today the New World Order arrived, and so forth.
We're here. We're here.
Yeah.
Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
My point is that it's already here. It's just a question of growing and intensity and dominance and so forth. The New World Order has been under construction ever since World War I, and seriously accelerated right after World War II. And then, of course, after 9/11, it got another boost in the throttle and so forth. So things are moving very fast, as you did observe, and anybody can see. Well, where are we in this process? I don't know how to measure that. I think that if we stand back and don't get too concerned with the details of the present scenario and just look at it historically, where we started from at the beginning of this country and where we are now, we can see that things have changed drastically in terms of how much personal freedom citizens had in this country in the early days, how much they have today. And the opposite side of that coin, or the obverse of that issue, is the growth of government control. So as government grows, freedom goes down. They're just opposed to each other. So if you were to look at the freedom government ratio, I suppose you could call it, back at the founding of this country, I think it'd be fair to say that freedom existed about in the realm of, say, 95 to 98%. You could do just about anything you wanted to do so long as you didn't injure your neighbor, you didn't steal from him, you didn't violate his right to life, liberty, or property, which I think is the proper arrangement of society and the state in society. I think the purpose, the real legitimate purpose of the state is just to protect its citizens against the loss of life, liberty, and property. And that's pretty much how it started out here. And the rest was up to the citizens. Citizens didn't ask the government to provide for them or to tell them what to think or control their education or provide insurance or, you know, teach them how to prepare for a job or any of these things. It just protect their lives, liberty, and property. Well, that's how it started. Here we are a couple hundred years later, and I would say that the freedom government ratio now is switched around to, people would debate this, of course, but in my view, I think we only have about maybe 20%, 25% of freedom left, maybe a lot less than that. And government has grown to 75 to 80% control over our lives. And that's not a static snapshot. That's a motion picture. It's moving. And it's growing, and it's accelerating. I don't think, now this is where you get in the realm of predictions, but I don't think this can go on more than another 5 or 10 years without that ratio going to 100% government control and 0% personal freedom. It's moving, and there's no indication right now that it's slowing down. In fact, as things get worse, unfortunately, Americans and people in all nations of the world, they don't realize what is causing this decline. They don't realize what really the forces are, and so they clamor for more of the same. They turn to the very people that created these problems and look to them for the solutions to the problems that they created. And as long as that condition exists, I don't know, it just seems to me like it's going to continue. You know, the old saying is, if you continue doing what you have been doing, you're going to continue getting the results you have been getting. So that is the pessimistic view. I guess to narrow that all down in a more specific answer to your question, I think that the world in general, and certainly America is not exempt from that, is heading toward totalitarianism, where every aspect of our lives, our personal lives, our economic lives, our social lives even, are going to be controlled by some kind of government edict and a vast bureaucracy to make sure that everybody complies. And one of the most important impetuses in that direction, of course, is the economic crisis that is causing more and more people to become desperate just for survival, and so they turn to the government as a solution. They say, well, we're broke, we need help, and so they turn to the very government that is eating out their substance and say, come help us. And so that's how I see it. It's a very bad picture, but I have to say, having painted that pessimistic view, that all is not lost, because at the same time, I also see a vast and quickening awareness among many people of really what the true situation is. Now, those numbers are still quite small, but when I started becoming aware of all of these issues way back in the 1960s, I don't think there was 1% or 1/10 of the population that understood all of this or even had any interest in understanding all of it. Life was too good. So I guess the silver lining to this dark cloud is that as things worsen, more and more people stop paying attention to their playthings and to their entertainments, and maybe they're taking a more serious interest in world affairs and domestic affairs and starting to ask questions, and that's necessary if self-rule, if self-government, if there is such a thing possible, is going to survive. So there's a growing awareness and I think a growing resistance to this trend, but it's going to be a really close call at the finish line.
Hey, and that brings us to the latest totalitarian dish du jour, Obamacare, which has blown up big time. The website doesn't work. Millions of people losing their health insurance that they were assured if you like your insurance, you can keep it. And they're going to get plans that go from anywhere from 50% more expensive to triple, with much higher out-of-pocket expenses. And all of a sudden, that has been a giant wake-up call to millions of people that, oops, maybe this government expansion thing is not so beneficial. Maybe I don't really want more government in my life. Maybe you want actually less government. You think that's become like a clarion call to the masses?
Well, yes, that's more or less what I was talking about. As things deteriorate and as the pinch gets tighter and tighter and the pain gets more and more intense, why people are stopping to take a look and ask questions. But there's a danger in that, because I think the Obamacare issue is a good example of what I'm thinking of at the moment, is that people are upset, many people are upset with Obamacare because it's going to cost more money. Well, if that's their only objection to it, they've missed the point. They don't realize that it's going to cost them their freedom, too. And they don't realize that there are ways to deceive them, because all that the politicians have to do is say, don't worry, it's not going to cost you any more money. As a matter of fact, we're going to provide this free. Use that word. We'll provide it free. It won't cost you anything. And they'll say, oh, okay, well, that's all right now.
And it's fine.
And that's fine. But they don't realize they're going to pay for it through inflation or some other way. And so, it's an issue of people are becoming concerned, but they don't necessarily understand what's causing their problem yet. And so unless they do, I'm still on the pessimistic scenario.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with you there that just the cost of it can be hidden, and the fact is that until they get to the real problem, which is the loss of freedom, which you pay the ultimate price for in the end. Let's face it. Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no getting away from that.
Yeah.
So, but you've got some solutions for the problems that we're going through. You've actually started an organization to help reverse this trend, and we're going to talk more about that up next on the FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com, 1230 WBZT.
Hi, it's Kerry Lutz. I recently decided to move my retirement account into physical precious metals to hedge against the coming times. If you want to move an existing retirement account into physical precious metals that you can hold in your hand, tax-free, there's no company that can do it more quickly and efficiently than Regal Assets. It took them just 24 hours to open my new IRA account, and all I had to do was fill out one simple form. The best part is that Regal Assets does all the work for you. They cover the setup and administrative costs for 2013. If you're interested in making the same move I did, call 855-678-6620, 855-678-6620. That's 855-678-6620, or visit them at regalassets.com. You'll be glad you did, and tell them Kerry sent you.
We're back with G. Edward Griffin, author of that classic, The Creature from Jekyll Island. I'm Kerry Lutz, 1230 WBZT. So, Mr. Griffin, your organization, tell us about that, what you're doing to try to reverse the trend of ignorance in America and really in the world.
Well, I'm really glad that you want to talk about that, because one of my favorite themes for years has been it doesn't make any difference what we know about these problems. It doesn't make any difference how concerned we are. It doesn't make any difference how we talk about the need for reform and blah, 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 if we don't do anything about it to change it. And everybody would agree with that, but that leads to that puzzlement point of apathy. Well, what can you do about it? I mean, these forces, this is what you hear all the time. They say these forces have so much power. I mean, they're in the government. They run the government. That's the police power. They can force you to do anything. They're in the media. They're in the schools. They're educating our children to like this system. They're everywhere. They're in the banks. They got all the money in the world because they create the money out of nothing. What can you do against that? And it's a good question, and many people come to the conclusion that they can't do anything about it, and that's the reason they reach that state of apathy. I have what I like to call my little 1-minute seminar on apathy, which goes something like this. If you picture yourself in a life raft, a little rubber raft out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and you're all alone, and you think this is a really bad spot to be in, and suddenly you realize that bubbles are coming up over the edge of the raft, and you realize that there's a leak in your raft, and it's in the bottom, and you have no way to patch it, no way to cover it, and this is really a serious crisis. What do you do about it? And the answer is you don't do anything about it, because you can't do anything about it. So you just lie there and sink. And that's the picture of apathy, okay? Now, change the picture, and you say, supposing you look around the raft, and there's a pump, an air pump, and a place to screw it into the raft. Now what do? Well, you start pumping away. Now you have changed from apathetic to the living picture of energy and activism, and you're doing something, because there is something to do. So that's why people, I think, hit this apathetic stage, is because they really don't see anything that they can do to change it. So naturally, they just lie there and sink. But now, so what can we do? That's the real issue. And I thought about that a lot over the years, and I finally realized that all we have to do is what our opponents have already done. They have taken over the political and social systems, economic systems of the world, not by military conquest. And they certainly didn't do it because of one individual doing it all by themselves. They joined together. They formed networks, and they worked together, and they gradually went into what they call the power centers of society. The power centers are those groups of people that join together for specific purposes, and for example, political parties, labor unions, church organizations, Boy Scouts, media organizations. The organizations are the action pivot points in society, and the sum total of all of these determine the policy of the nation. And so these opponents, and they've written books about this, by the way. We talk a lot about the books they've written and so forth, and I'll give you a website in a moment where you can read a lot of this stuff in the words of these people themselves. They decided that the way to control society is to move into these most important power centers and take them over at the top. And using that strategy, all they needed was about 0.1% of the population. They didn't need 51% in the voting booths to pass legislation. They needed 0.1% of the population in strategic points of influence in the power centers of society. And they started on that path about 100 years ago. It's amazing to see the history on that. And it didn't take long before they achieved their goal. And so today, even though the average citizen, I don't care what country they're in, may have very different views of what's going on, they may be unhappy about what's happening at the level of government, nevertheless, those in power continue to do what they've always continued to do, quite often completely contrary to the desires of the people at large. And it's often been a puzzlement to many people. How is that possible that our leaders don't follow our wishes? And it's because they don't realize that people have this herd instinct and they follow leaders. Leaders don't really follow people. People follow leaders. And so that's the trick, really, is to make sure that the leadership segment of the major power centers of society are in the hands of people who truly do represent the best interests of the average person. So, having faced that reality and having seen how these leaders of collectivism, which is what the system really is, collectivism, it's not socialism or communism or fascism or Nazism. The generic word for it is collectivism. They're all pretty much the same. And so we know that these proponents of collectivism have worked their way into the power centers of society and now lead every nation. What's the solution? Well, it's to replace them. To replace them with people who have a view that is not an axe to grind. It's just to get the government off our backs and return our personal freedom to us and let us get on with our lives. We don't need these social engineers telling us what to think, what to do, where to go, how to act, and all that sort of thing. So how do we get people of that like mind in many cases back in control of their own systems? And, well, the first step is they have to understand what the battle line really is. And so we created an organization to clarify this whole issue, to lay forth the problem in those terms, in terms of dominance in power centers of society, and then to provide an opportunity for people of like mind to network together and to help each other move back into these power centers and become influential once again. It's as simple as that. It's very simple. It's not easy, of course, because the entrenched power in these power centers is not going to just stand by idly and let you, take the power away from them. There's a battle to be waged there, but it's a battle not on the battlefield with guns and bullets and bombs. It's a battle in the organizations of America and every country. It's a battle at the podium. It's a battle for control of the support of large groups of people. And so that's what the organization is all about, and we call it Freedom Force International. And anybody that wants to really, become involved in this, I invite them to come to the website and read all about the strategy and the history on this sort of thing. And I think, if you have that burning desire inside you, and not everybody does, but if you have that crusading instinct and you just feel like this is not right what's happening in the world, we have to do something about it. If that sounds like it's you speaking, then I think Freedom Force is really for you. So I invite you to come to freedomforceinternational.org and be prepared to spend maybe a couple of days splashing around in the material there and reading and thinking, and then you can come network with us if you like, and we'll see what kind of mischief we can get into.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of mischief to be had, because the way things are now, boy, like you said, these people are not going to be removed from the levers of power. They're not going to go willingly, and
no,
it's up to you.
They're not going to. Well, you won fairly and squarely. That's not how they operate.
No, they've got the system rigged against you, and they're going to have to be removed kicking and screaming, basically. And
that's right.
But we saw when the U.S. was going to go take out Syria, all of a sudden there was a movement where people were just sick of this war, death paradigm, and they just rose up and said, we're not going to war with Syria. And what happened? At least up to this point, we didn't go bomb Syria. Didn't happen.
Yeah.
So maybe there is some hope here. Maybe a
little
optimism is warranted, right?
Yeah, I think optimism is definitely warranted, but it depends on what we do. I mean, if we just sit by and say, well, I hope this turns out okay, then there's not much room for optimism. But if larger numbers of people say, I guess it's time I get up off of my couch and get out there and become active in these power centers, then I don't think it's stoppable.
Yeah, definitely. Agree with you there. So just give us that website one more time.
Yes, it's freedomforceinternational.org.
All right, and I am a member of that organization, and want to thank you once again for coming on the Financial Survival Network. Mr. Griffin, it's always a pleasure listening to you speak, always enlightening, and of course, hear this interview and the others, and the link to Freedom Force International on financialsurvivalnetwork.com, and we'll talk with you again real soon. Hope we see you again soon as well.
Hey, thank you. I'm looking forward to that.
Hey, thanks so much.
All right, goodbye.
Bye.
I know we've got a lot of you out there who are coffee fiends just like me. You couldn't go one day without your Java. But here's my question. Why do you drink so much marginal coffee? You know, that watery stuff you get in some places? There's another life, friends, where coffee is good, right, and true. Our friends at Tonks buy your beans directly from the growers, roast it to absolute perfection, and ship it to you within 24 hours. It's a bi-weekly subscription which sends the best beans on earth directly to your doorstep for the price of just a few cafe visits. They'd love to send you a free sample so you can see what you've been missing out on. Use the URL tonks.org/liberty. That's TONX.org/liberty. They'll send you a free sample, and I'll tell you, once you've tasted their coffee, there's no going back.
The Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.